I will speak about an update of the environmental footprint methodology and the changes we have introduced towards the consolidated draft, which you find out on the DG Environment website. So not on our website from the JRC, but from DG Environment, you find the consolidated draft of the product environmental footprint and the organization environmental footprint. Very briefly, I'm from the European Commission, the Joint Research Center. We are kind of a scientific technical backup and internal support for our colleagues in the policy DGs, like Michele in DG Environment. We are heavily involved in trying to work towards the Europe 2020 goals. And of course, as a JRC, we are heavily involved in networking on a scientific technical level, and I think this year is as well part of this networking exercise for us. We are, again, within the Commission. Sometimes there's a bit of confusion that we are in kind of an external consultant to the Commission. No, we are one DG, just we don't carry the DG in front of us. Don't ask me why. We are working basically under the head of Barroso, of course. We have a commissioner who's responsible for both RTD and us, JRC. RTD are the guys which have the big money to spend in research projects. We are more involved in actually researching for the Commission. Our Director General is Dominique Ristori. Now, part of the Commission always means you have a disclaimer. Michele hopefully has one as well. What is presented here is part of an ongoing discussion process. So we are not there yet. Even if it's called a consolidated draft, it is still open to discussion, especially within the Commission. So in the service consultations will probably start soon. A final version of what we have on footprinting is expected in the early 2013 to become available. The potential policy options are under discussion as well, and Michele will talk about those, so I won't, because they are not part of my presentation. Briefly on the schedule, what we have achieved so far. We started with an analysis of existing methods, what is out there. We drafted our first drafts. We went into pilot studies with these, roughly 10 on the product side and 10 on the organization footprint side. We had a stakeholder meeting, then of course the pilots concluded and gave us valuable feedback, and you will hear from Gregory afterwards from one of the pilot studies, I assume. Mainly the drafting was finished in July. That's where you can find as well the status. Again, the final method guidelines will be out early next year. Now, what are our objectives? And these are in contrast to some of other initiatives' objectives, and that's why I want to highlight them here. We wanted, of course, to build on existing methods as far as possible, but we wanted to as well to produce a document where you do not need to consult a lot of other documents at the same time. That is what we called a standalone document. Now, I understand after Matthias' intervention that might not have been the luckiest of terms to use, because we do not want to be completely different from everybody else and do something different. So we will change that. Thanks, Matthias, for that. What we definitely want to do is a very comprehensive assessment or guide for an assessment. And comprehensive for me has always both aspects. The one aspect is from the classical life cycle perspective. All the stages of the life cycle should be covered, from the raw materials up to the end of life. And the other aspect of comprehensive, we do not want to have another method for a single issue assessment. So no carbon footprint, no water footprint, but a real multi-criteria assessment covering a broad range of environmental issues which usually you can cover with life cycle assessment. This does not even cover all environmental issues, but at least those which are currently covered or widely covered in life cycle assessment kind of thing. We want as well to provide guidance on how you may find out where to focus your efforts. So we don't want people to spend huge amount of time trying to generate inventory data if it's pretty clear from, for example, a screening exercise that those will contribute to less to 10% of your impacts. So that was a guiding principle for us as well, that we tried to bring in this question, okay, where can I focus most? What we wanted to do as well, and that separates us maybe as well from a few other initiatives, is we wanted to increase comparability. So it was a clear objective for us to try to be as specific as possible, to make as many choices as possible on relevant issues, because if you don't take them, everybody else takes them. And if everybody else takes them in a different way, you will end up in different ballparks with your results, so you cannot compare them. So what I think as well the speaker from Peter from Quebec highlighted, that you need to be sure that the methods are aligned if you want to compare the results at the end of it. Now, what has changed, broadly speaking? A lot of things have changed, but broadly speaking, in the consolidated draft versions versus the earlier draft versions which were out and went into consultation. We have strengthened the link to other guides. For example, we have made quite a few references more to the greenhouse gas protocol, where it was appropriate, of course, where we could do that. We have provided a comparison table to other key method developments in that area, so that you can easier find out where actually the different methods and guides and standards differ on core points. And that helps to better understand the differences. And again, for quite a lot of the differences that you can see, they go back to the request to us to provide a guidance which ensures comparability for products or organizations. And that requires a lot of decisions to be taken and a lot of technical detail to be included. Some changes, I can't say that I will cover all, but some changes are cut off, for example, that you say, well, I don't look at that at all anymore. We changed that. I think that was part as well in from discussions with the greenhouse gas protocol. That is not permitted anymore. Now the requirement is for things where you don't know, use the best data available. But don't cut simply off, not knowing anything about it. Screening, a screening level exercise in this iterative exercise of conducting a footprint. While it is not mandatory anymore, it is strongly recommended because it will help you to focus your efforts. But it is not a mandatory element anymore at that moment. Data quality requirements. There were a lot of discussions on this based in the stakeholder consultation, but as well from the pilot studies. More or less summing it up to, well, why do you not provide only reporting requirements, but the data quality requirements you put up are too difficult to achieve at the moment? What we have done is we kept to our point to have really minimum requirements for data quality in the guidance document, because otherwise we fear you compare really things you shouldn't compare. Assessments which are using completely different data in terms of quality, you should not compare them. So we have basically put in a threshold of a minimum data quality, but we have made it easier compared to the first version to achieve this minimum threshold of data quality. We have strengthened very much the role of product category rules. So we have learned that although we try to be very specific, we provide quite some technical detail on, I don't know, 100+ pages, it's still very general, on the general level. And you will not be relevant to specific product categories or organizational sectors, and you can't be that specific in a general guide. So we have strengthened already in the guidance document where PCR kind of things should play a major role. And we have as well provided requirements on what in such product environmental footprint category rules, as we call them, you will need to fix things. You need to fix allocation rules. You need to fix the questions which Matthias mentioned as well in parts. What do you take into account? What do you not take into account? You can do some of those things more meaningful on a product category level, but you have to define them. You can't leave them open. Otherwise, you will never be able to compare anything coming out of that. Last point, where I will go a bit more into detail, because I think it's still an open discussion in parts, is allocation at the end of life. So what do you do with recycling credits? We had a formula in. We changed the formula based on the stakeholder feedback, and in discussions now, in various discussions, we probably will have to change it again. Now, why? Our approach is we try to cover all situations in one formula at the moment in our guidance documents. For example, for the comparison of a product on the shelf, if you wanted to do that, you would need to take into account, from our perspective, environmental burdens which are related to different topics, which distinguish actually the environmental profile of this product or of the two products on the shelf. And that is, of course, you need to know, okay, how much virgin material do I need, where does it come from? Same, how much recycled content do I use in my product, and where does it come from? What's the emission profile? I, of course, need to know how much at the end of life is finally disposed of at the output. I need to know as well on the recyclability, the quantity and the quality. And I have to take into account that at least for many open loop recycling situations, you will have a downgrading of the quality. So we want to take that into account as well. And we say, well, it should make a difference for a product whether you design it in a way that after the fulfilling of its purpose, it is recyclable or not. And therefore, you should get credit as well for avoided burdens that you don't have to produce the stuff new from the first place. And after all, that sums up what we call our overall resource use and emission profile. Now, what we can see with the formula as it is now, we have, due to the facts, due to the fact that we want to take into account all these things before, you have the well-known problem of double counting. Now, I'm not that much of a scientist or driven by ideology that would really bother me. So double counting is a modeling effect. You are modeling anyway, so I might live with it. It's not nice, but I might live with it. One observation I cannot live with is that with our formula at the moment, for some extreme cases, for some extreme materials, you come to the situation where the formula can lead to overall negative results. And that, for me, is an indication that it is not only a matter of double counting, but it is a measure of providing results which can lead people into, let's say, not necessarily the best direction. Again, there are some extreme cases. We are at the moment calculating a lot of different cases with different materials and different formulas. And at the moment, we look at the situation, okay, what is if you give the credit only, not for the entire amount of what is recyclable at the end, but if you subtract what the company has used as recycled content at the beginning. Logically, there's not necessarily a link between those two, but you avoid double counting. The second is, well, why do you give a credit against 100% virgin production, while usually what you replace when you recycle is not 100% virgin material, but you replace, if it is a closed loop, what you have used yourself, so a mix between virgin and recycled content. If it's open loop, you could replace probably a market mix, an average market mix on the market. But you rarely replace 100% virgin material. That is what we are calculating as well. And the third point we are evaluating at the moment, whether we adopt an approach actually from France, in the BPX 30333. You have, I think they use it for plastics only, an approach which is called the 50-50 approach, where you divide kind of the emission profile and the burdens of recycling to 50% to the recycled content and 50% to recyclability at end of life. Again, that is a convention. It is avoiding double counting. It produces results which are not negative. Whether from a scientific point of view, I would be able to completely defend that is another question, but it produces results which are meaningful. And at the moment, I can say it looks, at least from what we have seen so far, preliminary results, that seems to be a good option as well. But again, these points are so important. I mean, that's quite a level of technical detail I'm going in here at the moment, but those kind of things, those where you could say, well, that's an allocation rule. You have to fix it if you want to end up with comparable results. If you don't fix that problem, if you don't put it in the formula, if you don't give clear guidance on in which cases you use maybe different formulas, you will end up in a weak decision support situation. So to come to the end summary, from the environmental footprint, what we wanted to do is to enhance consistency, quality, comprehensiveness of assessments, and the comparability for both products and organizations. On the way towards increased comparability, what we need to do is to narrow down choices. So exactly the opposite from the French experiment at the beginning, to leave a lot of flexibility to companies. We try basically to narrow down choices, and if you want the negative work of being prescriptive. Of course, a lot of people don't like that. It's often not the right choice, it's a convention. But if you don't do it, you will not narrow down the choices, and you will not end up in a comparable situation. We have introduced, due to both the stakeholder consultation and the pilot studies we had, quite a few things related to data quality, related to screening, related to allocation, related to the importance of the role of product category rules, from the early draft to this consolidated draft. Again, it's still a draft. We had a lot of useful insights from the pilot studies and the stakeholder consultation on both, on a methodological approach, but as well on practicality, on how do you do it actually according to our rules if you have to use the currently existing tools, databases which are on the market. And that was very important to us because we felt as well, to put out a method is one thing, to try whether actually it can be implemented one-on-one at the moment is another thing. And that is something where we go forward as well in the future to improve those things. What we always have as a challenge is to get the balance right between, you can say, scientific rigor and robustness and feasibility, practicality at the end of days for companies. While I often hear, well, you provide very much technical detail, I find it actually that the more technical detail you provide in a guidance, the more prescriptive you are, the more choices you take away from people who are doing the assessment, the more you get in an area where you are actually practical. People can actually do it. People may not like it, but people can do it. And that is, of course, a balance as well we have to see. If we want to bring down costs, if we want to make it easier applicable for a broader range of people, we have to provide that kind of level of technical detail that they can use it. I don't say they can use it like a cookbook or recipe, but that would be the ideal situation. You can go through a recipe and put all the ingredients in. You may still not like what you have cooked at the end of the meal, but you could do it. And I think we are on that way where we can get closer with the product category rules, which we will as well test in a new phase, that we can get down to that level, that it gets actually more practical, more applicable by a wider range of companies. And I think that is important to bring us as well a step forward, that these kind of assessments are not only done by the, let's face it, few front runners. With that, thank you very much.